About the decision on the loan application.
Yes, sir. How did it go? I don't mind if it's not the full amount. When I visited the bank to inquire about the results of my application, the loan officer, David, gaped in astonishment by my response.
No. Did you really think there was a chance?
In front of me, David began shredding the business plan.
There's no money to lend to a poor farmer. Stop struggling and just head back home.
Understood. I'll leave now. I headed over to my acquaintance's place to voice my disagreement. As I got back to the parking lot and opened the door of my pickup truck.
That was quick, wasn't it? How did it go? Did you get the full amount?
Sitting in the passenger seat, my acquaintance, Scott, spoke to me with a relaxed look. I was about to complain when I was drowned out by a loud voice.
Kevin, please wait a moment.
David's father came running over with a pale face. In place of Mike, who was too flustered to speak properly, I explained to Scott. Scott, the loan wasn't approved. Although we had initially been rejected, all the key players were in place. Expecting an immediate apology for the earlier attitude, I was instead caught off guard by an unexpected counterattack from David. My name is Kevin. Up until recently, I worked at a well-known company in the state, but I resigned to go into farming. It wasn't because I was tired of working as an employee or because I dreamed of a self-sufficient lifestyle. My parents divorced when I was in the second grade of elementary school. I was taken in by my mother and ended up living at her parents' house. However, within a few months, my mother ran off with another man and disappeared. After that, my grandparents took over raising me. There were many hardships, but the hardest to bear was the cruel words from the neighbors.
It must be tough having such a worthless daughter.
Some even said this directly to my grandparents. Every time, I couldn't bear to see their sad faces. To change the situation, I needed to become someone who couldn't be easily rumored about, so I enrolled in a top university in the city and eventually joined a well-known local company after returning home.
You really have a wonderful grandson.
As expected, those around me praised me and changed their tune. And so, at 42, I lost my grandfather, and the following year my grandmother as well. This prompted me to quit my job and start to grow vegetables in earnest using their plots of land.
Leaving such a good company to start farming, there must have been something going on.
Once a day, I was the subject of gossip. Of course, I hadn't messed up at work or anything. I had been employed at Scott Holdings, the parent company of a corporate group. During that time, I had the opportunity to be seconded to a subsidiary for about 2 years. This subsidiary operated a restaurant chain that, despite being a chain, offered dishes with a strong focus on seasonality and origin. I was impressed by their corporate efforts. And I realized anew that even with one vegetable, there are various varieties, and how suitable they are for cooking, and different dishes can vary greatly. Having seen my grandparents grow vegetables, I became interested in agriculture during my secondment. After they passed away, I thought it would be good to start farming on the remaining land. Thank you for your cooperation today. I visited a certain regional bank and stood nervously before the man in charge of loans. My grandparents originally wholesaled vegetables, but due to their old age, They had been just hobby farming for nearly 20 years before they passed away. All the agricultural machinery had been sold off. To buy new machinery and realize the agriculture I aimed for, I needed a substantial amount of money, so I turned to the bank.
Please don't be so nervous.
The loan officer, David, appeared with a kind-looking smile. Thank you. I always thought loan officers were tough to deal with, so I'm relieved to see someone kind. I'm glad an acquaintance recommended this place. Relieved, I blurted out, and David burst out laughing. Something about his laugh struck me as off. I felt like I was being looked down upon. Shaking off such disrespectful thoughts, I presented my business plan. So, this is the plan. Was this the right way to write it?
Yes, that's fine.
Good, then, let me explain. Just as I was about to start explaining the purpose of the business.
There's no need for you to explain.
Do you mean to say that you'll look at the documents and I should come back another day?
No. I think it's best we don't waste each other's time.
It seems my earlier feeling of being looked down upon wasn't just my imagination. David pointed out the window.
I saw you getting out of your pickup truck earlier. Well, I thought maybe I could lend you about $10,000. But how much are you actually asking for?
$100,000. I said in a low voice.
Coming to the bank in a pickup truck, dressed in what looks like loungewear, a t-shirt and sweatpants. Honestly, if you were in my shoes, would you lend $100,000? Of course not.
The business plan I had spent hours on was returned to me as if it were thrown at me.
Thank you for today.
Our conversation was forcibly ended, and I went back to the pickup truck, feeling David's gaze on me. I contacted Scott, who had recommended the bank to me, as soon as I got home. Reluctant to explain every detail, I just mentioned it seemed unlikely that I would get the loan. I thought there might have been a misunderstanding, but when I mentioned David's name, he was assured if it was him, he definitely knew it was a referral. I was even told that perhaps my explanation was poor, and the next day, I had to go back to the bank. I'm really sorry to come back so soon, but could you please reconsider? When I handed over the business plan again, this time it was accepted smoothly.
Understood. We will hold on to this.
Maybe the message had gotten through before, and I was just being tested to see if I was worthy of the $100,000 loan. Thank you, I really appreciate it. Without the loan, it would take an enormous amount of time for my plans to come to fruition. Seeing hope, I returned home spiritedly, unlike the day before. A week later, I was called by David to discuss something.
Regarding the decision on the loan application.
Yes. How did it go? I don't mind if it's not the full amount. David gaped in astonishment.
No. Did you really think there was a possibility? Not even $10,000.
Confused, I listened as David continued without concern.
It's troublesome if you keep coming here every day. I just reviewed your application to satisfy you.
That's terrible. I've been hoping all week. If there was no chance, you should have just told me clearly.
I did tell you clearly that I was denying the loan. The terrible part is you not listening and coming back to the bank.
Although it was unbecoming of a banker, David was right. so I couldn't argue any further.
I'll let you in on a secret. I am the son of the president of the bank. I'll probably take over this bank someday.
As he stood up from his chair, David shredded my business plan right in front of me.
Lending money to someone like you, who clearly won't be able to repay, would tarnish my brilliant life. You're just in the way. Could you please leave quickly?
I pulled out my phone to contact Scott, who had recommended this bank, but David lowered his voice as if to admonish me.
Didn't you hear me? There's no money to lend to a poor farmer. Stop struggling and just go home.
I gave up on contacting and stood up. Understood. I'm leaving. Today's response confirmed it. David doesn't know anything. Disappointed, I decided to go see Scott in person this time. Returning to the parking lot, I opened the door of my pickup truck.
That was quick, wasn't it? How did it go? Did you get the full amount?
Scott, sitting in the passenger seat, spoke to me with a relaxed look. I was about to complain when I was drowned out by a loud voice.
Kevin, please wait a moment.
An elderly man with a pale face came running over.
Long time no see. Isn't that Mike?
Although he looks just like David, he's a different person. Likely, this man was the bank president.
It's been a while, Scott.
What's the hurry? Did you forget to give him a copy of the contract?
Scott was clueless about the fact that the loan had been canceled altogether. His carefree tone only made Mike look even paler.
Well.
Let me explain instead, Scott. The loan application was not approved. Apparently shocked, Scott slid out of the passenger seat.
You must be joking. You mean you couldn't get the full amount?
Not just the full amount, $0. Realizing I was not joking, Scott's demeanor changed. Mike shrank pitifully.
I mean, it's really my lack of oversight.
As he began to explain the situation, whether fortunately or unfortunately, David, the loan officer, appeared.
Dad, are you okay?
How can I be okay?
I thought so. You've been gone too long. I knew something was off. These guys must have caused a fuss, right? I'll chase them away, so just stay back.
Mike held his head as David's words added fuel to the fire.
Hey, you really hadn't listened to who these two were right in front of you.
David looked reluctantly between me and Scott.
I see. So he didn't know the situation and rejected the application.
I should have been more attentive, but I told him through my secretary that a client recommended by Scott would be visiting.
Mike, expecting the application to be approved, had come to the branch to greet me personally. However, as soon as he mentioned my name, the branch managers started acting strangely. They hadn't heard anything from David and told Mike that they hadn't approved. It seems he was flustered and chased after me because I came to the bank while he was still confused about how to explain himself.
I heard from the secretary. You were listening to her talk while playing games on your smartphone. It's a problem just playing games during business hours, let alone not listening to essential talk.
But she always just nags at me. I remember she said she had something important to talk about, but I thought it was just the usual nagging.
It's your fault for behaving in a way that makes her want to nag.
Mike sighed deeply.
It's late, but this is Scott. He's the president of Scott Holdings.
At the mention of the company name, David froze. No wonder. Not only is it a well-known company, but it's also an important client for David's bank. He seemed to finally realize the gravity of what he had done.
Kevin was an excellent employee at Scott Holdings and was close with the president. He said the business would surely succeed and asked us to it with a positive outlook for the loan. And look what you've done.
Watching David become utterly disoriented, I gradually calmed down. In fact, I felt a bit guilty about using Scott's influence to get the loan. I came here because I had no other choice, but I also was at fault. I thought I would forgive his rude behavior if David apologized.
Our company has grown quite a bit. We're considering switching our main bank to a major bank.
Scott seemed to be guiding David to make it easier for him to apologize. He kept glancing around nervously.
No way. If we lose your business, it would be a huge loss for us. Please forgive us.
How disgraceful.
Mike reflexively tried to apologize, but David stopped him.
Dad, think about it. A major bank, right? No matter how big they say the company is, it only dominates the local area. Besides, they just received a loan for a new project from us. There's no way they can easily refinance that amount. It's not realistic to stop dealing with our bank.
Caught off guard by his defiance, Scott and I exchanged looks.
Do bad. Your business plan will never come to fruition.
What followed was chaotic. Mike and David's argument heated up, causing passers-by to stop and a crowd to gather in front of the bank. Unable to get my pickup truck out, it seemed someone had called the police. And Scott and I had to explain ourselves. After the questioning, we had no choice but to retreat and head home. For the next year, just as David had said, Scott couldn't cut ties with the bank. As a year was about to pass, Scott and I visited the bank again. David was still working at a branch, not the main office, and we asked for him to be called.
Well, long time no see. Glad to see you're doing well.
David must have thought we were there to discuss another loan. He showed no remorse, speaking with a smug attitude.
Did you think after a year the issue would cool down and I'd approve a loan? Sorry, but I am a banker after all. I'll assess your application calmly and fairly.
He judged people by their appearance and didn't listen to them, yet he dares to talk about being fair. I wanted to speak up, but I remembered the purpose of today's visit and held back. I just came to say hello today.
Hello. What's the matter? Took a loan from the wrong people and planned to skip down a night.
I handed David a business card. Finally, all the preparations are done. My company has become a subsidiary of Scott Holdings, and my business plan was evaluated favorably, so we got a loan from a major bank.
And what does that mean?
Unwilling to accept reality, David asked again. I patiently explained one more time. It means the business dealings between your bank and Scott Holdings are coming to an end. If you think I'm lying, you can ask the person in charge of us. David, who had assumed confidently that we could never sever ties with them, seemed to realize the gravity of the situation and came to apologize, much like Mike did once. Since there was no one to stop him today, he kept apologizing profusely.
I'm very sorry. If we lose your business, our bank will be in trouble.
This guy suffered last year because he couldn't get a loan due to you. Your fault pushed his business back a whole year. Can you give him back that time?
It's tough to give back time, but we can increase the loan amount.
If only he had apologized like this last year, things wouldn't have gotten so complicated.
Time can't be replaced with money. The most capable people know that.
Scott looked David straight in the eye.
Do you know why you're still at this branch? Your father is letting you train here because he doesn't think you're ready to be a bank president yet. In other words, he thought you weren't fit for the role unless you show significant improvement.
I pressed further, seeing David despair. I heard Jack is really outstanding, right? I heard from Scott that David's younger brother, Jack, also works at a different branch of the bank. Jack is not only excellent in sales performance, but he's also well respected by other employees. Mike was considering calling him to the main office soon, but hesitated because it would mean promoting him over David, the eldest son. Probably today's events will be the final nail in the coffin, and David's path to becoming the bank president will likely be closed. If you can't become the president, come work for us. We're hiring a lot of part-timers. David just stared at the floor, full of regret. Relieved that I could now focus on my business, a new unexpected situation arose. My business involved receiving fees from restaurants and shipping vegetables tailored to their specific needs. To realize the plan, a large farm needed to be established. Due to the aging population, there were many fields in the area that were neglected or barely used as hobbies. I needed the loan not only to buy farming equipment, but to purchase these fields as well. Of course, $100,000 wasn't enough, so the plan was to expand a farm over several years, but with the backing of Scott Holdings, I was able to borrow more than expected from the major bank. Everyone was happy to sell their unused land, and I quickly achieved the desired size for the farm. As a result, families who sold their fields paid off their car loans and remaining mortgages. The bank's income from interest decreased significantly. The blow to the bank wasn't limited to losing the business with Scott Holdings. Due to these blunders, David was not just prevented from going to the main office but was driven out of the bank altogether. Jack was supposed to be transferred to the main office immediately after David left, but he refused, saying, "I can't return until I've restored the transactions my brother lost." He's been working hard, reaching out to various companies and individuals. Because it's a family-run business, Mike is barely holding onto his position with a pay cut, but it seems likely that Jack will take over his position soon. Although I heard about David and others' subsequent fate through Scott, I was busy with work and soon forgot about it.
Hey, come on. Didn't you say you're hiring part-timers?
Months later, a much thinner David showed up at my farm with his resume, which was a shock. Probably because of his arrogant attitude, he couldn't even pass an interview for a part-time job, let alone a full-time position. I would have considered hiring him if he had come with a more humble attitude, but for the sake of other employees, I couldn't hire David without signs of remorse. "You're not employable in your current state. Why don't you learn from Jack?" With those harsh words, David left the farm. No one knows what he's doing now. Having successfully gotten my business off the ground, I had a moment where I thought it was a good decision to focus on a farm for restaurants rather than catering to the general consumers. as long as the appearance of the vegetables isn't drastically altered, such as being too large or too small. They can still be purchased for cooking without any change in taste. Between the recent incident at the bank and the fact that I've always felt overlooked, with people only focusing on superficial aspects without seeing the real me, there's nothing that brings me greater joy than this.
I came to see how you were doing, but it looks like I didn't need to ask.
Scott, visiting to check on me, smiled contentedly at my expression. I'm glad this job worked out. Thank you so much for your help.
Same here. Thanks to you, our performance is doing well, and our company's reputation rises every time we're featured on TV. When you said you were leaving, I thought I had to do something to keep you, but I'm glad we could work together.
Thinking back, Scott had been appreciating me since I was a clueless newcomer. I want to be like you, Scott.
Don't flatter me. I have plans today, so I can't take you out for a drink.
I want to continue being someone who makes sound judgments, not swayed by appearances or rumors.